$43,000. That is what disappeared from one retired couple's savings in just 14 months, not because the stock market crashed, not because of a scam, not because they overspent in retirement. It disappeared because they followed a piece of advice that almost every finance channel on this platform is telling you to follow right now. You have probably heard it too. Convert your pre-tax retirement accounts to a Roth, pay the tax today, lock in tax-free growth forever. Get ahead of rising tax rates before it is too late. It sounds smart. It sounds disciplined. It sounds like exactly what a responsible retiree should be doing in 2026. Here is something worth noticing before we even get into what happened to them. Type Roth conversion into any search bar and you will get page after page of videos, different faces, different channels, all repeating the exact same script. That is not because dozens of independent experts all discovered the same brilliant insight at the same time. It is because one video said it performed well, and everyone else copied the formula. When 10 different people tell you the same thing with the same confidence, your brain assumes it has to be true for everyone. It does not. That is consensus bias, and it is exactly what set this couple up for what came next. But here is what almost nobody puts in the title of those videos. There is a number buried underneath all of that advice, and it changes everything. That number is $2.5 million. If your pre-tax retirement accounts sit under that number, aggressive Roth conversions do not protect your wealth. In a lot of cases, they quietly destroy it. By the time this video ends, you are going to understand exactly why that is true and exactly what to do instead. Stay with me, because the story that cost this couple $43,000 is more common than you think, and it might already be happening to you right now without you knowing it. My name is David Marshall. For years now, I have spent my time doing one very specific thing. I sit down with retirees after they have already made their financial decisions, and I help them understand what those decisions actually cost. Sometimes that is a good conversation. Lately, it often is not. If you are new here, welcome to David Marshall Finance. This is the channel where we take the advice everyone else keeps repeating and we actually run the math on it out loud in plain English so you can see whether it applies to you or whether it is quietly setting a trap. If that sounds useful, hit subscribe right now, because today's story is one of the clearest examples I have ever walked through, and I promise you it is not what you expect. Let us go back to the couple I mentioned. We will call them Mark and Diane Foster, ages 62 and 61, retiring early ahead of schedule the way a lot of disciplined savers dream of doing. Between the two of them, they had built up $1.2 million in pre-tax retirement accounts. A 401k here, a rollover IRA there. No pensions, a paid-off house. On paper, they had done everything right. And like a lot of people who do everything right, they went looking for the next smart move. That is when they found the Roth conversion videos, dozens of them, all saying the same thing. Convert now while tax rates are historically low. Do not wait for the government to raise rates and punish you later. Get ahead of it. So they did, aggressively. Every year for 4 straight years, they converted a large chunk of their pre-tax accounts into a Roth IRA, paying the tax bill directly out of pocket each time. It felt proactive. It felt like they were finally beating the system instead of letting the system beat them. Here is the part of the story almost nobody warns you about. Mark and Diane were not on Medicare yet. At 62 and 61, their only health coverage for the next several years was a marketplace plan under the Affordable Care Act, and that plan was subsidized based on their income. In one particular year, Diane wanted to squeeze in one more small conversion before December 31st, just $10,000 on top of what they had already converted. Their advisor at the time did not think twice about it. What is $10,000 going to change? It changed everything. That $10,000 pushed their modified adjusted gross income past $87,000, which happened to be the exact ACA subsidy cliff, the income point where their health insurance subsidy eligibility did not shrink. It ended completely. And in 2026, there is no cap on how much of that subsidy you have to pay back. The Fosters did not lose a small discount. They had to repay an entire year of subsidy all at once on their next tax return. Just over $10,000 gone, triggered by a conversion roughly the size of a used car down payment. That is one piece of the $43,000 I mentioned at the start. There is more, and it gets worse before it gets better. Let us fast forward. Mark and Diane are now 67. Social Security has started paying them a combined $50,000 a year. Their advisor, still riding the Roth conversion train, kept telling them the aggressive early conversions would pay off big once required minimum distributions kicked in at 75. Except when the Fosters actually reached 75, and someone finally ran the numbers on what their RMDs would have looked like without all that early converting, something strange showed up. Their projected RMDs would have landed somewhere between $55,000 and $70,000 a year. Combine that with their $50,000 of Social Security, and their total taxable income would have landed them right back in the 22% federal tax bracket. Here is the punchline. 22% is the exact same bracket they were already in while they were working full-time. Think about what that means. They spent 4 years aggressively prepaying tax at 22%, pulling real money out of their portfolio to hand to the IRS early, in order to avoid a future tax bracket they were never actually going to reach. They were so busy defending against an imaginary future problem that they created a very real one in the present. You cannot save taxes from a bracket you are never going to be in. That sentence is worth sitting with because it is the single biggest flaw hiding inside the blanket advice to convert aggressively no matter your balance. This is the entire difference between bracket management, which pays close attention to where you will actually land, and blind conversion, which assumes the worst about a future that may never show up. To be fair, if your pre-tax accounts are large enough, say $4 million or more, RMDs alone can push you into the 32 or 35% bracket in your 70s, and converting early at 22 or 24% is a legitimate smart move. But Mark and Diane did not have $4 million, they had $1.2 million. And for people in that range, the math almost never works the way the videos promise. Now here is where it gets even more interesting, because there is a second layer to this that almost no one accounts for, and it is a big one. In 2026, a married couple filing jointly, both over 65, has access to a stack of deductions most people have never bothered to add up. There is the standard deduction, $32,200. Then there is the age 65 and older booster, an additional $3,300. And then there is the newer senior bonus deduction worth $12,000. Add those three numbers together and you get $47,500. That is income the Fosters could have pulled out of their pre-tax accounts every single year and paid $0 in federal tax on it, not a low rate, zero. I call this the retirement tax shield, and it might be the single most underrated piece of the entire retirement puzzle. Every dollar you convert aggressively before you actually need to is a dollar that could have filled up that $47,500 shield completely tax-free later. Instead, the Fosters prepaid 22 to 24% tax today on money that, had they simply waited and drawn it down naturally in retirement, would have been taxed at 0 to 10%. Multiply that $47,500 shield across 20 or 25 years of retirement, and you are looking at over $1 million of income that could have passed through the Fosters' hands completely untouched by federal tax, simply by filling that space on purpose every single year instead of triggering it all at once through aggressive conversions. That is what real bracket management looks like. Not converting everything as fast as possible, but filling each year's available zero and low tax space deliberately, the same way you would fill a cup exactly to the rim without letting it overflow. That is not planning ahead. That is giving away free, already 0% tax space in exchange for a tax bill you did not have to pay yet. And we are still not at the biggest hit to their account, not even close. There is a third problem, and this one is pure math, no opinions involved. A traditional account and a Roth account grow at exactly the same rate, as long as your tax rate going in matches your tax rate coming out. That is not controversial. That is simply how compound growth works. But when you convert, you have to pay that tax bill from somewhere. If Mark and Diane had paid it from inside the IRA itself, the math would have been close to a wash. Instead, like most people following this advice, they paid it out of their taxable brokerage account, using cash that was also invested and also growing. Every dollar they pulled out of that brokerage account to hand to the IRS was a dollar that stopped compounding for them permanently. Prepaying a tax bill today to avoid a smaller bill tomorrow is not savings, it is a loss. Over 4 years of aggressive conversions, that drag alone added up to real money sitting on the sidelines instead of growing quietly in the market. Here is a fourth cost that almost never gets mentioned in the Roth conversion videos, and it is the one that genuinely surprised the Fosters the most. In 2026, a married couple earning under $98,900 in taxable income can sell appreciated stock from a regular brokerage account and pay 0% in long-term capital gains tax on the profit. 0%. This is one of the most powerful, least talked about tools in the entire tax code. But a Roth conversion counts as ordinary income, and ordinary income stacks first, at the very bottom of your tax return, before capital gains ever get added on top. Every dollar the Fosters converted pushed their capital gains further up the stack and further outside that 0% window. In 2 of their 4 conversion years, they accidentally knocked themselves completely out of the 0% capital gains bracket, forcing them to pay 15% tax on stock sales that could have been entirely tax-free. I call this bracket competition. Your Roth conversion is not just competing with your income tax bracket, it is competing with every other tax advantage space you have, and it usually wins that fight simply by showing up first and taking the spot. Now let us talk about the part of this story that ties everything together, because this is where the real $43,000 figure actually comes from, and it is bigger than any single mistake on its own. We already covered the ACA subsidy cliff, the $10,000 the Fosters had to repay because one extra $10,000 conversion pushed them past the $87,000 threshold. But that is just the first surcharge in a chain of them. Once the Fosters turned 65 and moved on to Medicare, a new trap appeared. Medicare uses something called Modified Adjusted Gross Income, or MAGI, to decide how much you pay for Medicare Part B and Part D. Cross $218,000 in MAGI as a married couple, and you get hit with an income-related surcharge called IRMAA added directly onto your monthly premiums. And here is the twist that catches almost everyone off guard. Medicare looks back 2 full years to calculate this. So a large conversion the Fosters made at 67 did not show up on their Medicare premiums until they turned 69. 2 years later, a bill they had completely forgotten about arrived automatically, deducted straight from their Social Security check because of a decision made 2 years earlier. That is the IRMAA look-back delay, and it is exactly as sneaky as it sounds. Picture it. 2 full years of feeling like they had dodged a bullet, nothing unusual on the horizon. Then a notice arrives, not a request. A notice informing them their monthly Social Security deposit was being reduced starting the following month permanently to cover a Medicare surcharge triggered by a decision they had almost completely forgotten making. There is a third link in this chain. Up to 85% of your Social Security benefit can become taxable, depending on your combined income. Every dollar of Roth conversion counts toward that calculation too. So the same conversion that cost the Fosters their ACA subsidy competed with their 0% capital gains space and eventually triggered IRMAA, also quietly pushed more of their Social Security benefit into taxable territory. Add it all up, the ACA subsidy repayment, the lost 0% capital gains space, the upfront cost drag from paying taxes out of pocket instead of letting that money compound, the IRMAA surcharge that showed up 2 years late, the extra Social Security tax on top of it all. That is how a couple with $1.2 million in pre-tax savings, doing what they believed was smart, responsible, get ahead of it planning, watched $43,000 quietly leave their retirement in just over a year. Retirement tax planning is about how all the moving parts connect together. Nobody making a 5-minute video about Roth conversions is going to walk you through all 5 of these at once, because it simply does not fit inside a 5-minute video. But it fits inside your actual financial life whether anyone mentions it to you or not. Now, before you go and cancel every Roth conversion you have ever made, I want to be completely fair here, because this video is not saying Roth conversions are bad. They are one of the most powerful tools in the entire tax code for the right person. Consider a different couple. We will call them Richard and Patricia Sterling. Longtime engineers, aggressive savers, and by the time they retired they had built up just over $4 million in pre-tax accounts. For the Sterlings, the math flips completely. Their future RMDs alone, without even adding Social Security, would push them into the 32% bracket or higher. For them, converting aggressively today at 24%, even accounting for some short-term cost drag, is a legitimate, mathematically sound move, because they are absolutely going to spend decades in a much higher bracket later if they do not. That is the entire point of the $2.5 million line. It is not a magic number that governs every rule in the tax code. It is roughly the point where your future RMDs start to realistically compete with or exceed the bracket you are already in today. Below that line, in most cases, you are prepaying a tax bill you were never actually going to owe. Above it, you are getting ahead of when you absolutely will. So what should someone like Mark and Diane have actually done instead? There are 3 strategies that almost never get airtime because they are less flashy than convert everything now, but they work. The first is capital gains harvesting. Instead of converting pre-tax money and creating brand new ordinary income, the Fosters could have sold appreciated stock inside their brokerage account, up to that $98,900 threshold, resetting their cost basis at 0% tax. Same tax-advantaged outcome, none of the downstream damage to their ACA subsidy or their capital gains bracket. The second is withdrawal sequencing. Rather than converting one large lump sum in a single calendar year, the Fosters could have drawn down a careful mix of brokerage and IRA funds each year, specifically calibrated to stay just under the IRMAA and ACA thresholds. Same goal of managing future tax exposure, but done gradually, with the actual thresholds kept in mind instead of ignored. The third is qualified charitable distributions, or QCDs. Once you turn 70 and a half, you are allowed to send money directly from your IRA to a qualified charity, and that amount counts towards satisfying your RMD without ever counting as taxable income to you. For anyone who is already charitably inclined, this is one of the most efficient tools in the entire tax code for shrinking future RMDs without prepaying a single unnecessary dollar in tax today. Here is what that would have actually looked like for the Fosters if they had used all three together instead of 4 aggressive lump sum conversions. Every year, they harvest gains inside the 0% capital gains window. They draw down a calibrated mix of brokerage and IRA funds designed to stay under $87,000 while relying on ACA coverage, and under $218,000 once Medicare starts. And once they cross 70 and a half, a portion of their annual giving flows directly from the IRA as a QCD, shrinking future RMDs without ever touching their tax return. None of it makes for a dramatic thumbnail. All of it would have kept the Fosters' $43,000 exactly where it belonged, growing quietly in their own accounts, instead of disappearing into subsidy repayments and surcharges they never saw coming. So let us bring this back to where we started, $2.5 million, that is roughly the line. Under it, run the actual numbers before you convert, because you might be prepaying a tax bill from a bracket you are never going to enter, giving up a $47,500 tax shield, losing compounding on the cash you use to pay the IRS, knocking yourself out of the 0% capital gains bracket, and setting off a chain reaction of ACA, IRMAA, and Social Security surcharges that can take years to even show up on your radar. Over that line, the math can flip entirely, and aggressive conversions might be exactly the right move for you. The advice was never wrong for everyone, it was just never right for everyone either. And that difference is the entire gap between the Fosters, who nearly lost $43,000 to good intentions, and the Sterlings, for whom the exact same strategy built real, lasting wealth. Before you go, I want to leave you with something I come back to on every single video on this channel, because I genuinely think it matters more than any tax bracket, any threshold, any dollar figure we talked about today. Money is like oxygen. Nobody walks into a room and tries to breathe in as much oxygen as physically possible, filling their lungs past capacity just because more happens to be available. You do not need a room packed with oxygen. You need enough oxygen consistently in every room you walk into for the rest of your life. That is the entire goal. Aggressive Roth conversions, chasing maximum tax optimization, treating your retirement plan like a competition to squeeze out every last percentage point, that is trying to fill your lungs past capacity in a room that already had enough air in it. It does not make you safer. It just spends resources you did not need to spend, solving a problem you did not actually have. The goal was never to hoard the most tax-free dollars on paper. The goal is to make sure you can always breathe at every stage of retirement without gasping, without panic, without a surprise bill showing up 2 years late and taking a bite out of your Social Security check. Enough oxygen consistently for the rest of your life. That is the entire philosophy. That is what real retirement planning is actually for. If this video helped you see your own numbers a little more clearly, that is exactly why this channel exists. Hit subscribe because we break down exactly this kind of trap every single week. The stuff that sounds smart on the surface and quietly falls apart the moment anyone actually runs the math. I am David Marshall, and I will see you in the next one.